Well, here we go. It's that time of the year again, as it's time to do the preview of the Decision Day games. And like I said before, I am going to split these Decision Day games into two different previews. First, looking at the Eastern Conference version, which all these Eastern Conference game that's going to be kicking off at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, 12:30 p.m. Pacific. And then in the next video, I will be doing the Western Conference version and looking at all the Western Conference game that is going to be happening on Decision Day. And also, you notice I am wearing a Houston Dynamo jersey that I've just recently got a couple of days ago. And the reason why I'm wearing a Dynamo jersey is because the Dynamo is the only team that is not going to be playing on Decision Day, and technically their season ended in that loss against Montreal. So, for those that are going to kind of blame me for basically wearing the jersey of their team in the preview and basically jinxing them, well, those people don't have an excuse this time, because I'm going to be wearing a jersey of a team that isn't even going to be playing on Decision Day and have already half their season ended. But let us actually begin talking about these games, and we start off with the first one between FC Cincinnati versus Atlanta United. And by the way, most of these games, I think there's like only 2 games where there isn't really anything to play for, because all the other games, there's definitely some playoff implication in terms of teams battling for the playoffs or staying above the red line, or some seedings that definitely needs to be played for. And then we'll talk about in the next video, there's also that freeway battle for the top spot in the Western Conference. But we start off with this game between Cincinnati versus Atlanta, and in some way this game is kind of a game that really doesn't matter that much, because we know Cincinnati has already been eliminated from playoff contention, and they have a record of 4-8-21, and almost are trying to equal what the Quakes did back in 2018 of only getting 4 wins that season. Whereas for Atlanta United, they pretty much have clinched for their playoff position. I mean, I know technically, mathematically, they can still be eliminated from the playoffs, but a lot has to go wrong for them if they miss the playoffs. And maybe that's kind of the reason why I think Gonzalo Pineda decided to kind of park the bus in that game against the Red Bulls. I think he was kind of doing the math before the game and realized that, they can get a draw against the Red Bulls. They can basically head into Decision Day on a very good position, and hence that's why they kind of park the bus, which I'm pretty sure if you're an Atlanta fans, I mean, I'm not sure are they kind of happy or unhappy about it, because anytime when you look at Atlanta, this is not supposed to be a team that you think that should just park the bus in the entire game, and that they almost made history in the last game against the Red Bulls, only becoming the 3rd MLS team to fail to register a shot in the full 90 minutes. Now, as I mentioned, they pretty much have clinched their playoff position, though they're still going to be playing for something, and that they're looking to try to get 4th place and trying to get home field advantage, and they can do that with a win in this game and hope that NYCFC lose to the Philadelphia Union. But in terms of this one, the first part, I think they should get it, because, they're playing FC Cincinnati, which, as I said many times before, it's basically a free win all the week. I mean, I know I hate the fact that I've always have to mention that with Cincinnati, but that's what happened when you lost 21 games this season in a team that, instead of playing for pride for the remaining part of the season, it looks like this team is already checked out. And that if you're a Cincinnati fan, I think this is probably the best week for you, because you know that this is the last time you get to see this team play this season. And again, there's going to be some dramatic changes that I expect this team to go through, and it's almost like they're going to blow it up for the 3rd time and hope that maybe 4th time is going to be the charm heading into next season. But now, moving on, in terms of the next match, is going to be Columbus versus the Chicago Fire. So, as I mentioned, how Atlanta, they pretty much have locked up their playoff position, barring any crazy things that's happened. The same can goes with Columbus, though it's the opposite, because they need a lot of things that needs to get their way. First of all, they need to win this game against Chicago and hope that DC, of course, lose or draw, and hope that Montreal, of course, lose and draw, and also hoping that the Red Bulls can lose and somehow make up a goal differential of 7 goals for the Red Bulls, which, yeah, that is a huge, big if, knowing the fact that, not only the fact that the Red Bulls, they might lose their game against Nashville, but they're probably not going to get destroyed, knowing the fact that they are a team this season that, with all their games, I don't remember one time that the Red Bulls have just getting absolutely demolished. And the same goes with Columbus. I don't remember one game that they have really throttled a team. I think the only game I remember they throttled a team was against Inter Miami, but that was because, it's Inter Miami. They're not a good team. Though you could maybe say the same with the Fire, where, I know lately they have been playing very hard, and that, these players are definitely playing for their jobs, but knowing what has happened just the last couple of days, of how they've already announced some roster move, and that they already talked to 6 players on this roster that is not going to come back next year, and I'm pretty sure those 6 players are probably not going to be in the lineup or even playing in this game, because that would be kind of awkward. The fact that you've been told that you're not coming back to the Chicago Fire, and you're basically playing for them in the last game. I mean, I don't think they would feel like they want to play for the team, because why should I play for this team if I'm not going to be here after the full 90 minutes is over? So yeah, I think this could be a team that maybe just kind of lied down, but even then, this is a Columbus team that, even with the talent that they had on the attack with the likes of Zaire, Santos, and potentially Jersey Zardes, though I think Zardes is out for an injury, I don't think they're going to score like 5 or 6 goals, and also hope that the Red Bulls can get blown out and have to make up 7 goals. And that's only one thing that they need to get right. As I mentioned, they need a lot of things that goes right, and it just feels like it's going to be such a disappointing year. And that when I do talk about some of the most disappointing team this season next week, Columbus is definitely going to be one of those, when many people thought that this was supposed to be an MLS Cup contender, and just the injuries have just killed their season, and not to mention some underachieving that has gone on with this team. But now moving on, in terms of the next match, is going to be Montreal and Orlando City. So now we finally get to a game where there's actually a lot that has to play on decision day, and that of course is this one, because for Montreal, currently have a 12, 10, and 11 record. It's pretty simple for them. They win, they're in the playoffs. They lose or draw, they're out of the playoffs. So in some way, it's kind of almost like a playoff game for Montreal, where they have to win to, of course, move on into the next round. You can say that their playoffs kind of start in this game, whereas they're going to be playing against Orlando, team that are pretty much set to make it to the playoffs, though they still need to get a win in this game or get a draw in this one, or they hope that the Red Bulls, of course, lose to Nashville, and then they can, of course, make it to the playoffs too. But that being said, they're going to be facing against a team that is going to show a lot of desperation. And, for Montreal, it's one thing that they're facing a must-win game where they were able to get the victory against Houston, that is not like near the bottom of the Western Conference. But it's another to face against a team like Orlando City that's also desperate to try to clinch or playoff position. So in some way, that this is not going to be easy for Montreal and for Wilfried Nancy's team to do so. But if there's one thing that I know about this team, and one thing I know about Wilfried Nancy's team, this team hasn't given up, and they're definitely looking to trying to get a big win in this game and almost kind of replicate what they did last year. Because remember last year where Montreal need to get a win against DC to make it to the playoffs? Well, actually, I don't think they needed a win, but with how Other Resort was going on decision day, Montreal had to get a win, and they did against DC on the road and face kind of a playoffs 6-pointer in that one. Well, here we are again in 2021, and if they can replicate what they did last year on decision day, they of course will make it to the playoffs. But now moving on, in terms of the next match, is going to be the New York Red Bulls versus Nashville SC. So for the Red Bulls, it's pretty simple for them. They can get a win in this game against Nashville, they of course clinch playoff position. If they can get a draw in this game, they can also clinch playoff position. Or in case if they do not win this game against Nashville, they will have to hope that maybe Montreal will draw or lose their game, so that they can of course make it to the playoffs. And it's not going to be easy to get a win in this game against Nashville, who currently have a 12-17-4 record. And Nashville, they're actually still playing for that second seed. They're looking to try to get back to second place in the East with a win, and the Union get a draw or a loss. And I know some people might think the second position isn't really as valuable as the first position in the Eastern Conference, knowing the fact that that's a position where you get a bye for the first round of the playoffs. But still, that second position is important, because let's say if New England fall in the second round, all of a sudden that means that Nashville is pretty much next up in terms of having to get to host all the playoff games until we get into MLS Cup. So it's very big for them to try to lock up that that second position. And also, it's kind of important for them to get a win in this game too, not just for seeding wise, but just for confidence wise. I mean, this team has really struggled down the stretch. I mean, they only have like one win in the last 7 games, and that one win was against FC Cincinnati, and even that game they look like a mess in this one. And it's not going to be easy against a Red Bulls team that, like I said, this Red Bulls team, they have looked really good down the stretch, although recently that game against Atlanta will definitely frustrate them, because if they could have got a win in that one, they would have clinched play off position, and they're going to look hungry to try to get a win in this game. Though if they are going to get a win in this game, they have to do it against a team that have yet to lose at home this season. And well, actually, they don't really need to get a win in this game. A draw, of course, will do it, but ideally, I think they would love to win this game and try to become the first team able to knock off Nashville at Nissan Stadium. And also Nashville, the other thing that they also might try to avoid is to not tie that record that the Chicago Fire has back in 2014 for the most draw in an MLS season. Because throughout the season, I talk about how there's just way too many times Nashville, of course, drop points, and they're kind of like the draw kings of MLS. Well, they could kind of make some history and maybe be part of that draw kings of the league by potentially drawing their 18th game this season. That, as I mentioned, only the Chicago Fire have ever drawn that many games, but that they're certainly trying to avoid doing so, because they need a win to get themselves some confidence heading into the playoffs. You do not want to head to the playoffs on a winless run or on a bad run. And right now for Nashville, when you look at these last couple of games, they have just not looked like that team that was in the summer, where they were just winning every single week and looked like to be an MLS Cup contender and can really go at New England for that crown in the Eastern Conference in the playoffs. But that being said, moving on in terms of the next match, and speaking of New England, they're going to be playing against Inter Miami. Now, for New England, this is an interesting situation for them, because they know that they already clinched Supporters Shield, and the only thing that they're playing for is trying to extend the most points ever in a MLS regular season, as they currently have that record, and they can maybe make it 74 or 76 points at the end of the season. And they're playing against an Inter Miami team that is already thinking about the offseason, as they're already eliminated from playoff contention. But what's interesting about this game for New England, and kind of a decision that Bruce Arena will have to make, is do he rest all his guys coming into this one? Because one thing that is interesting about this season in the playoffs, and I think this was kind of the case last year or the year before, where because we do have the international break that's going to be happening next week, that means the playoffs is not going to start in two weeks, and we're not going to have any MLS action for 2 weeks. And knowing the fact that New England also has the first round bye, they're not going to be back into action until Thanksgiving, and that is a really long layoff. Consider how packed this season has been. And this also is kind of something that I'm not sure if I mentioned before, where is it worth it to get the top seed in your conference? I mean, it's worth it knowing the fact that this team is going to be going to the CONCACAF Champions League next season, and also they get home field advantage pretty much throughout the rest of the playoffs. But what is probably not worth it, knowing the fact that they have such a long layoff, and that it's good to, of course, have rest, but it's also sometimes can be bad to have too much rest. And you just think that with this team having 3 weeks of rest, they are going to be very kind of rusty heading into that playoff game, and they're going to be playing against a team that have already had a playoff game under their belt, and probably even had some momentum heading into that game too. And going back to what I said about the decision that Bruce Arena has to make, whether it rests his guys or not. Well, if he rests his guys, this team could go a month without kind of playing together, and that is a really long time, especially when playoff time does start to happen. So yeah, we'll see whether or not if Bruce Arena maybe risk it and try to put his team just to maybe gets that match fitness before playoff time would come. But I know for sure that one player will not be playing in this game is Adam Buxa, who, as I mentioned in the News of the Week episode, he will be out with a knee injury, and they are really hoping that he can be back in this team in the playoffs, or at least 100% healthy by the time this team get into the second round of the playoffs and playing whoever that is the lowest seed in the Eastern Conference then. But now moving on, in terms of the next match, is going to be NYCFC versus the Philadelphia Union. And before I actually talk about this game, I forgot to mention that this game between Nashville and the New York Red Bulls is the chosen game that ESPN decided to broadcast for their decision day game. So both ESPN and Fox basically had a choice to broadcast which decision day game, and I'm kind of surprised they decided not to do this one, because consider that I feel like maybe this one has a little bit more playoff implication than the one that we're going to see with Nashville and the New York Red Bulls. But who am I kidding? I'm not the one that chose the decision. The people in ESPN basically they chose it, and they decided to broadcast this game instead of this one. But they could also easily broadcast this one too, because this is between two really good teams that is also fighting for that second position in the Eastern Conference, that is NYCFC and the Philadelphia Union. NYCFC, of course, have a 14-8-11 record, while the Union has a 14-11-8 record, and the Union basically could lock up second seed with a win in this game. Or if they don't win this game and get a draw in this game, they just hope that Nashville will basically follow suit, because they do have the tiebreaker over Nashville, despite the fact that both teams are tied on point. While for NYCFC, they can still get that second seed, but they need to, of course, get a win in this game and hope that Nashville, of course, lose to the Red Bulls in this one. And, knowing coming into this game of how red hot NYCFC has been, I won't be surprised they can surprise people and get a win in this game against the Union. But that being said, the Union, this has also been a team that has also been red hot, and in some way this is between two really good team, and two teams that we could potentially see in the playoffs, and almost like a preview of maybe in the second or even in the Eastern Conference final that we're going to see. Well, most likely in the second round we can see a preview of this matchup that can take place, and it's going to be interesting to see who, of course, gets the win in this one. And again, for NYCFC, they want to get the second seed, they definitely need some help, but for Philly, it's pretty easy. Just get a win in this game, or if they don't win in this game, just hope that Nashville, of course, will follow the same result and they clinch that second seed in the Eastern Conference. But that being said, I am now going to switch boards and look at the last game that is going to happen in terms of the Eastern Conference game on Decision Day. So for the last Eastern Conference game on Decision Day we're going to talk about is Toronto FC versus DC United. So I forgot to talk about this when I did the Montreal versus Orlando City game. Technically, TFC, this is not their last game of their season, because, they are going to be going to the Canadian Championship, and they're going to be facing Montreal again in that Canadian Championship. Somewhere down the line, they are going to be playing one more game, and, the Canadian Championship final, I still don't know exactly when they're going to happen, and I'm really hoping that it will happen this year, because they actually gone through the whole tournament this season, and it would be such a shame if CSA decided to cancel again. And in some way, it could be also a dick move to do, because imagine if CSA decided to say, well, it's great that we have this Canadian Championship. Oh, wait, I'm just going to cancel it at the last moment, and this tournament doesn't really matter. I mean, maybe no wonder why during the Canadian Championship this season, a lot of people kind of pay attention, because they know that the CSA is going to do something very, very dirty and trying to cancel the game. But like I said, let's just hope it's not going to be the case this season. I'm assuming it's probably not going to be the case, considering we're definitely in a better situation right now in the pandemic can compare to what we were back in the beginning of the season. But likewise, in this game between TFC versus DC United, this indeed will be the final game for TFC in the regular season in MLS, as they're already being eliminated from playoff contention. And for DC, they're hoping that this is not their last game of the season, but they still need a lot that needs to go right for them to make it to the playoffs. First, they need to get a win in this game against TFC, and that they have to hope that the Red Bulls lose their game and Montreal somehow lose or draw their game. But, the first task they need to do is get a win in this game against TFC, and TFC has done a great job in terms of spoiling chances, and especially spoiling some teams' chances to make it to the playoffs in the Eastern Conference. And not to mention the fact that DC have only won 2 games this season on the road, and the road struggle continue for this team, and it's been kind of a problem for this team for the past couple of years. It's not going to be easy for this team to, of course, get all 3 points, and it's also going to be frustrating if they don't make it to the playoffs again, because I really think when you look at this DC team and under Hernan Asada, there's definitely a much better improvement than the team that they were last season. I mean, you can even see it in terms of the soccer that they play. They play such a fun brand of soccer, and that you know, even though at times I kind of question in terms of what Lasada is doing, at least as a neutral, I enjoy every time watching a DC game, because you know that there's going to be goals, and you know that there's going to be some crazy scoreline after the end of this game. But, you know, unfortunately, if you're a DC fan, you're thinking that, well, yeah, it's great to see this amazing soccer, but there's times where it just doesn't work out for them, and that there's no wonder why this is also a team where, you know, they can have they're gonna have a game this season where they can win like 7-1, which, by the way, that was the last time when both of these teams, of course, face off against each other. Or they could have a game like a 6-0 resort against NYCFC in the same season. That's what Lasada ball basically brings. It brings chaos and thing, and, you know, I hope that, you know, as a neutral, I hope they do make it to the playoffs, because I love to see chaos ball in the playoffs. It was great to see, you know, the Quakes, of course, making the playoffs, not just because I'm a Quakes fan, but also for everybody knowing the fact that they also kind of bring that chaos ball in the playoffs, and it just kind of brings that unpredictability heading into the playoffs. But again, you know, a lot still needs to go right for DC this season, and that, you know, if they don't make it to the playoffs, it will be very frustrating knowing the fact that this is no doubt a better team than it was last season, but still, they're pretty much going to be finished around the same position that they were last year if they don't make it to the playoffs this season. But yeah, there you have it. That is pretty much it for the preview of all these Eastern Conference game on Decision Day. Like I said, I will, of course, do the Western Conference preview of Decision Day after when I finish recording this video. But let me know in the comments below, what do you think of all these games, and also make sure you leave your prediction in the comments section below. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I, of course, will see you guys next time.